plurables. Gregg Jarrett with us, of course, Fox News legal analyst, #1 best-selling author. Kim Strassel, she writes for the Wall Street Journal, a weekly column, Potomac Watch, and appears on Fridays on Wall Street Journal show that they have on Fox News and others. Glad you're both with us. Kimberly, let's start with you. You haven't been with us in a while. Just want to get your take and where this is all going and Comey's reaction to what's happening to him.
Well, first of all, you were talking about Bob Mueller's testimony, and the thing that was most striking to me about that is that in addition to him doing what he was actually asked to do as part of this investigation into Russian interference, that was half of the report. The other half, we now know, was about protecting the FBI and building on Jim Comey's stories so that they didn't blow up the entire FBI fiction that somehow this was legitimate. And that became incredibly clear as Mueller was testifying, in which, as you mentioned, he refused to answer any questions. All these things that had to do with the dossier were supposedly outside of his purview. How could they be outside of his purview? As, you know, Congressman Matt Gaetz pointed out, he said Christopher Steele has acknowledged that Russians gave him this information. We now know all of that information was false. That obviously potentially was disinformation. How could it be outside of your purview to ask if the dossier was itself a Russian attempt to interfere in our election and sow discord and undermine a new president? So, I mean, this shouldn't surprise anybody, by the way. Bob Mueller, other than Hoover, was the longest serving FBI director of all time. And the idea that he was ever going to go do a legitimate investigation that looked into Comey's actions and how this mess began was beyond the realm of possibility.
And your reaction, Gregg Jarrett?
Well, I agree. He not only said that it was beyond his purview, then he said he dismissed any investigation into the Clinton campaign and Christopher Steele and the dossier as, well, that occurred, those events occurred before my appointment, which is incomprehensible since his entire collusion investigation predated his appointment. So that made no sense, and quite frankly, so much of his testimony made little sense, and I think that's not only a reflection on the fact that he didn't write the report and he wasn't really in control and command of the investigation, but also the fact that it was severely biased. I certainly agree with Kim. But now we have what I think is the real investigation, and I know a great many Americans who believe that the president was indeed a victim of a witch hunt and a hoax, are frustrated that it has taken so long. But if I may paraphrase the late Felix Frankfurter, the great Supreme Court justice, when he said, justice too often never comes. So we ought not to reject it because it comes late. Now, this is late, but it is never too late to hold those accountable who engaged in corrupt acts and lawlessness.
Well, the thing is, do you have confidence in Durham? Do you have confidence in Barr? Do you have confidence in Horowitz? Do you have confidence that every aspect that I go back to the series of questions? This is Lindsey Graham asking the Attorney General, Bill Barr, what is important, what's not important. Here is this exchange, which I think is critical.
Do you share my concerns about the FISA warrant process?
Yes.
Do you share my concerns about the counterintelligence investigation, how it was opened and why it was opened?
Yes.
You share my concerns that the lack of professionalism in the Clinton email investigation is something we should all look at?
Yes.
Do you expect to change your mind about the bottom line conclusions of the Mueller report?
No.
Do you know Bob Mueller?
Yes.
Do you trust him?
Yes.
How long have you known him?
30 years, roughly.
You think he had the time he needed?
Yes.
You think he had the money he needed?
Yes.
You think he had the resources he needed?
Yes.
You think he did a thorough job?
Yes, and I think he feels he did a thorough job and had adequate evidence to make the calls.
Do you think the president's campaign in 2016 was thoroughly looked at in terms of whether or not they colluded with the Russians?
Yes.
And the answer is no, according to Bob Mueller.
That's right.
He couldn't decide about obstruction. You did. Is that correct?
That's right.
You feel good about your decision?
Absolutely.
Kim Strassel, that to me was the tipping point. Then, of course, Mueller testified. We saw what a disaster it was. Where do you see it going?
You look at those three individuals you mentioned, Sean. I think in terms of Bill Barr, we should have confidence that he is going to get to the bottom of this. And not just because of comments like that, but if you listen to other interviews he's given, two things have been very encouraging to me. One is that he seems to have already a significant knowledge of events, which is more than you can say for Mueller, not even claiming to know who Fusion GPS is. But he also seems to have an understanding of the gravity of what is being accused here, of our intelligence agencies essentially meddling in an election and not being forthright with FISA courts and not being forthright with the public. So I think that's important. Durham, we'll see what comes, but he has an excellent reputation as a guy who is not afraid to go after even our own intelligence agencies. That's history, and I think that's encouraging. Those are rare prosecutors who are willing to go against members of their own, as it were, and hold them to account. And then Horowitz, look, I'm very, very encouraged that he sent that referral about Comey, regardless of the Department of Justice's decision not to pursue charges. The fact that Horowitz was willing to go there suggests that he is also not afraid to speak truth to power, and that the individuals he's investigating here will be held to a bar and a standard regardless of how famous or infamous they are now on Twitter or radio talk shows or TV shows.
Let me ask you both, because I think the big bombshell and surprise is this whole issue of Peter Strzok now suing the FBI and the DOJ. I know you saw this in the queue at Fox. Gregg Jarrett, what is your reaction to Strzok? It's kind of humorous to me because we now know all the things that he's done. I think he's now opening himself up. He's claiming that his termination was politically driven and illegal.
Well,
I don't think so.
McCabe has done the same thing, protesting and resisting his own firing for lying. This seems to be a matter of course. There is a wealth of evidence that both McCabe and Peter Strzok deserved to be fired, and they were. I don't think that goes anywhere. By the way, I agree with Kimberly about John Durham and William Barr, and I'll point your attention to the very revealing interview that Barr did with CBS News, and I'll quote him. He said, "These counterintelligence activities directed at the Trump campaign were not done in the normal course and not through the normal procedures as far as I can tell. It has to be carefully looked at," he said, "because the use of foreign intelligence capabilities and counterintelligence capabilities against an American political campaign, to me, is unprecedented, and it's a serious red line that is being crossed." End of quote. Now, that tells me that both Durham and Barr have wised up. They know what was going on here. It is disappointing to some people that after a criminal referral by the IG on Comey to the Department of Justice, they have apparently reportedly declined to prosecute. I would say only this: not all corrupt acts by government officials can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt as crimes. It may very well be that Barr and Durham feel they have a stronger case to be made in the near future against Comey for something like FISA abuse.
All right, stay right there. Kimberly Strassel, Gregg Jarrett are with us. News Roundup, information overloaded. All right, wrapping things up here with Kimberly Strassel and our friend Gregg Jarrett. Just your quick reaction to Peter Strzok suing the FBI and the DOJ. Kimberly Strassel.
Well, it's ludicrous, obviously. He's shown more than enough cause to have been let go. Mueller himself removed him from the team, which was your first indication that even if he was too big a red line for Bob Mueller, you know that he didn't have a future at the FBI. Look, I think the more important thing is when we get this Horowitz report is accountability, okay? And I would like to kind of second what Greg said, that the real reason we should be fighting for this is information so that people are held accountable. And that might not always mean an orange jumpsuit, all right? I would prefer to have the entire story of what happened here, to have reports that pointed out where people violated rules and regulations and acted inappropriately in their official capacity, to make examples out of them, and so that we can also have some guidance for Congress going forward.
If you premeditated a fraud on a FISA court and you lied to a court to deny somebody their their constitutional rights, if you rigged an investigation, if you turn the powerful tools of intelligence on the American people, those are crimes, Kimberly. Other people went to jail for far less, didn't they?
Some of them are crimes. All I am saying is that whatever comes out of this report, whether everyone is held to a crime or whether some people are targeted for crimes, I think the important thing that we should all be caring about is getting the full story, and that is what I hope to see come out of this.